And what is this little guy's name or little
He
girl?
loves phone calls.
Who is it?
Oh, this is Loki.
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 Right. That's right. I remember now. Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for.
I like your little neck scarf.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is great. I had this for years. It's from Japan, and then it turned up again. Someone was using it as a dish towel, and I was like, "No, that's my scarf." So I took it, and thankfully it works. It works well. So what I'm going to do today, we can certainly go into any particular questions and so on, but I just want to start going through some of the body graphs in chart analysis. I also have a number of celebrity body graphs I've been adding. So I just thought it would be fun to go through some of these and just kind of, it can be group analysis, group keynoting. I can say what I see, and then if you see anything, Nicola or Pockets, thank you for joining. If you see anything in any of these body graphs and you want to comment and just point it out, something that jumps out at you, then by all means, let's do that. And yeah, there are definitely a few fun ways we can approach them. I was kind of thinking about that, how I like to approach body graphs in different ways. And I'm not sure if it's differentiated enough to put a name on it, but I mean, some of them obviously are like magic square analysis or doing a Steve Rhodes analysis. Those are kind of specific techniques. But I was also just thinking, just with conventional human design, and especially from the centers class I've been doing, to approach with the centers in mind. So let me show the first body graph I have here. And I'm just going to go through chart analysis. Of course, if anyone has special body graphs they want to look at during this time, we certainly can. But what I'm going to pull up for now, this is Dave Myers. And so I'm just going to go ahead and share Dave with Percy and Desi. If you've watched his videos, you know he calls his personality Percy and the design is Desi. Kind of cute. And yeah, so many different ways to approach. So I'm going to start. So normally, what I would do is I would start with the split definition, and I would start with being a manifester and what it is to be a manifester and all these things. I'm going to do a little different. Instead of looking at the bridging gates, which is normally where I would focus for a split definition chart, I'm going to start with the centers. And I like to look at the body graph in the context of this person has a mission to do. I mean, we all do. And when you think about, sometimes it's really clear what someone's mission is. Like Ra obviously had a mission to spread human design. And you can kind of see certain clarity of what someone does. Also, if you happen to know them, like I know Dave, and I know that he's very creative and does great video and comedy and music and art, and just a very creative person. So then I would kind of think, okay, what does this design lend itself to? And then talking about the center-based approach, this was kind of an interesting thing that came up in our class. It was this idea that you only really have energy for what defined centers you have in the long term. In the long term, you're going to run out of energy in other areas. And so looking at four centers defined, and this is the energy to share feelings. Two different ways of sharing feelings, both individual, deeply personal feelings, mutative feelings that might change other people, as well as collective appeal, sharing in experiences and generating new feelings from having that experience. Now, anytime I see two channels between the same two centers, I automatically see a problem there. And the problem is that each one is going to be hindered by the requirement of the other that catches up to it. So someone with just 35, 36 here can just have these wild experiences that have beginning, middle, end. It's fine. But here's the thing about the individual. The individual, if they like something, will do it forever. If they like someone, they'll be in a relationship for the rest of their life. If they like the same food, they'll eat it every single day. I mean, the individual gets stuck on things. It's very personal, and what they personally connect to, that's it. So it's so different. It's like 35, 36 needs to have those new experiences. 12, 22 doesn't necessarily need that experience to end. It might not want that experience to end, or it might prevent it from ending, or it might get hung up on it and not let it happen in the first place. Or you just kind of see the conflict and competition between two kinds of circuitry anytime you see two channels defined between the same two centers. So then what else does this does Dave have in his body graph? He has a defined root, which I really like this idea of the root being. I like what Steve Rhodes says when he says it's endurance, the endurance to try again, and it's where the program has given us enough energy to keep going once we failed. That someone like you, Nicola, with the undefined root, if you do it, it doesn't work, well, that's okay. You just try something else. But for Dave, it doesn't work. He's got to try it again. He's going to just keep trying it again and again and again because for him, it's about having that energy to try again. What is he trying to do? Well, the spleen we know is very physical. It's about this is a channel of material transformation. Steve Rhodes gives the keynote of success, and this would kind of be the material success. For Ra, the keynotes of the spleen are feel good and awareness for survival and things like that, but it's basically very, very related to the physical. So this is if you don't feel good, keep trying until you feel good, but also keep trying until you succeed in materially transforming your environment and really making it into a successful environment, a conducive environment. And this is also 54, which 54 is kind of a big deal for Dave. I just know personally because his dad is a personality sun 54. And Dave also has 54. He has it twice. He has the nodes on the design side, and then on the personality side, his Mars is in 54.5. So I just know that 54, basically 54 is all about mundane interaction and having the energy to kind of make small talk and keep in touch with people and just have that mundane interaction with them. And also to look out for your tribe and help them get ahead. Because 54 is ambition, but it's not like a cutthroat ambition. It's more like getting a bunch of other people jobs and helping them get ahead until they later help you because they don't forget and they kind of pull you up into that. So I know here with this 5432, this is really the program saying that he's equipped to never give up. That's kind of a keynote of the root. Don't give up, withstand the pressure, withstand the stress, and keep on going. I mean, this is fueling the process to never give up on making the world a better place, improving your lot in life. Also 18, of course, is part of that improving theme. But the way 5432 improves, they're kind of makeover people. They're kind of, let's give this place a makeover. Let's have new interior design. Let's get a haircut and buy some new clothes and do all these things. And so it really is this freshening up. And it takes a lot of energy to continually freshen things up. The root is this fuel that says you guys have to keep doing it and try again and do it again. And it's kind of this persistence. It's like you hear about the person who started in the mail room and eventually got up into the executives and so on. And that's kind of the theme of that 54. Every 54 wants to become a 45. It wants to follow that stream. 5432 to 4426 and then 2145. So knowing Dave and seeing this capacity that he has to be very to just try again when something doesn't work and just keep going with it. And so just like those are the things that the centers have energy for. The centers have energy to keep trying again, to succeed and to materially transform, and that ambition. I mean, that energy to just keep trying, and then the energy to share feelings. Something else that I loved that Steve Rhodes said about the throat is just how social it is. And it makes sense if we realize that 7 of the gates of the throat, all but the 4 primary gates of action, are primarily communication gates. And even the gates of action are gates of communication. Like 12 is a gate of action. It's all about articulation, which is used to communicate. So because of that, I see the throat in a different way now. As when people have a defined throat, they really have a lot of energy to socialize. And having known Dave, I know that he has energy to call people on the phone. He has energy to call me on the phone. He has a lot of energy to share. So it's just seeing that the energy for sharing, the energy for feeling, the energy for persisting, and almost that kind of gritting your teeth and persevering and just going, just continuing on through difficulty. So basically the ability to face adversity, and then ultimately the ability to succeed on the material plane, which is a big part of that. And it's succeeding tribally through mutual support. So yeah, that's kind of my center-based approach to this. Normally, I would look at the bridging gates or other aspects, but just kind of just saying like, what does Dave actually have energy for, and what doesn't he have energy for? He doesn't have the energy to deal with a lot of G center stuff, which means really he doesn't have the energy to put the energy into being picky about who he's around and where he is. And instead, he's kind of go with the flow, where if he ends up somewhere, that's where he is. And that's what I've noticed about undefined G is they don't have the energy to stand their ground and have this standard of, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to hang out with that person. I'm not going to go there. It's kind of just like, okay, I'm trusting the group I'm with, or I'm trusting the person I'm with. Now, I have seen that Dave does not have a lot of energy in general for travel and things like that. That can be a little bit exhausting for him. And I've wondered if a defined G has a stronger resilience to travel, but I don't think so because I've known some undefined G people who are actually it's the opposite. It's that me with a defined G, I would put my foot down and say, no, I don't want to experience that because it's exhausting to me and it kind of wears me down. And I've seen undefined G people who've moved to like 20 places in a year, like just kind of nomadic. So it's an interesting question there. But just what Dave has energy for, he doesn't have energy to find and be very particular about things in the way that a defined G is. He also doesn't have the energy to really enforce his will, right? So he's gonna back down and he's gonna find a compromise and he's gonna find a way to work with other people rather than some built-in mechanism that's forcing him to exert his way or the highway kind of thing. He doesn't have energy for that. And then he doesn't really have energy to respond or to be available through basically being on call. So he's going to work best as a manifester, being able to work in bursts of energy and then having his peace when he's not doing that. And his peace is basically he's not interrupted. It's like really good habits probably for everyone, but especially for manifestors are to kind of have a nice boundary where it's like they don't answer their phone from Friday to Sunday or just carving out places to have peace. I think for a generator, we can sometimes have that fantasy, but when it comes down to it, we like having something to respond to. We like having the option. And it's not that manifestors don't like being informed. They certainly do like keeping their finger on the pulse and being in the loop. And he has this mundane interaction of gate 54, which is going to be there to kind of interact with people. But overall, I would just say the way Dave probably works best is not on some sort of hourly on-call thing, not a service-oriented job or something where he has to respond, but something where he can work in a burst of energy to create something new. He has 1222, which is a creative channel and needs that creative outlet, and then that 3536 needs to have new experiences. So yeah, I would say from the center perspective, he's not really here to think really hard about things and try to solve things and figure them out and try to find things and try to set his strong boundaries and stuff like that. Nor is he here to just be on the clock and working for someone else per se. What he's really here to do seems like to really share certain feelings through music and through humor and through video art and film and things like that. And I'm just saying this because I know him personally. It's not like it shows that in the chart, other than the 1222. And here to have a lot of mundane interaction and to help people in his tribe to be supportive. So those are kind of the fundamental keynotes of his channels and circuitry and centers. Very basic, but that is one approach to just kind of start with fundamental of what's defined, what isn't. So I'd love to hear any comments from anyone that they'd like to speak to this. And I also have a comment from Rachel that I can read. First of all, though, real quick, anyone have anything they'd like to share? And then I can read Rachel's comment. Okay, I'll just read it. So she has a question about this chart using the Steve Rhodes keywords and split definitions. Okay, yeah, it's a good question because we were looking at Steve Rhodes where he puts feeling for the solar plexus and endurance for the root. And then when it's split, so is the feeling sharing and enduring success. Right. Yeah. I had the same question. So we're on the same wavelength today, Rachel, because I was thinking the same thing. I was like, he has energy for the endurance to work for success, but not for feeling. And like, how do we extrapolate? How do we deconstruct the fact that the split is on one side and that he's going to be drawn to those bridging gates? In fact, that could be a very big not self theme for him. So, one way to interpret that would be that ultimately, if Dave's in a relationship and it doesn't work out, try a different relationship because he does not have the energy to keep trying to make the relationship feel good. Or if he's trying to go on a trip and it doesn't work, go on a different trip. Don't try to make it happen. If he's, if anything where he's tempted to try to use that root energy for the solar plexus, and that's the difficulty. Because if he were designed that way, he would have 30 or he would have 55 and he would be a very different person because then he would be designed to keep trying again to feel better and trying again to capture the feeling and trying again to start the experiences that will lead to getting more feelings and trying again to enter into the relationships to have the romance to get the feelings and all that. And he's not here to persevere in that way. He's not here to have, he has a defined root, but that root doesn't have energy because of those bridging gates. Right, the route to solar is his split. And yeah, I could see that work hard, play hard. Although I don't know, I mean, undefined sacral and undefined ego. So it's a question if that's, how hard they're meant to work. But okay, so Rachel's comment is maybe he feels the not self draw to endure feelings, and he can endure, but only for spleen stuff. Yeah. So this would be an interesting way of keynoting it, which is that if the root is powering the ability to fail and keep going and kind of just like eat failure for breakfast every day and like still be fueled to persevere, this kind of hardened, not in a negative way, but just keep going, don't give up, keep going, don't give up. Well, what is it saying that he cannot give up on? Not giving up on ambition, not giving up on improving his material circumstances, not giving up on having a better life in some sense through ambition, the ambition to improve one's life, the ambition to clean the house and make it nice, the ambition to freshen up things, to get haircuts and new clothes and new socks and all these kind of freshening, transformative behaviors, which are also, they all operate through the support network of mundane interaction, and that you support, like this is like sending Christmas cards and like sending birthday cards, things like that. Yeah, Rachel's comment, this guy seems like he'd be fun and successful. Well, he makes incredible films and he's a great musician, and yeah, I mean Dave's great. So, but of course, being a 5'2", it's always like they could be doing so much more because everybody sees that second line of like, you should be famous. Yeah, do you have a comment there, Nicola?
I do, yeah. So I, I'm wondering what is the gate name for 38?
The fighter?
Uh-huh. Yeah. So I feel like that would be playing into that quite strongly. I definitely feel that the competitiveness between those two channels, that's a interesting and a good way to put that. Um, and I think when I look at this chart and not really knowing Dave, I think that the sacral, like the undefined sacral and ego center could really have wreaked havoc in his life, particularly with this chart. Um, Trying to find the balance between these two strong emotional senses inside of him, and this need to keep going and keep trying as the fighter. Um, and from what I've seen of his videos, it's interesting. I'm noticing his variable as well. To be right centric with the left perspective. I really feel that in the videos that I see of his on Instagram, which I really enjoy. They always make me feel something, which is wonderful. But it's like there's all this stuff going on, but there's always like one thing to look at in it as well, which just really
Oh, that's that
yeah,
left variable perspective, I guess. That's his only
yeah,
left. That's so funny.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and I, just looking at his personality, Sun and Earth, or Percy, Sun and Earth, grace and oppression. I mean, that feels like it's particularly poignant with everything else you've been saying as well.
Yeah, that gate 22 in Pisces, and this is the cross of informing, which is a cross that actually has the 1222. That's actually, you can see that the 1222 as a channel are in the incarnation cross itself. Yeah. No, that's some great commentary, and I do love noticing that he's not only three parts right, he's three parts solar plexus binary, which, if you study the binaries like in the Steve Rhodes way, or even without, just in kind of conventional analysis, the fifth and the sixth tone are both part of the solar plexus binary, and so they're different than being right variable with the fourth tone. Right variable with the fourth tone is right variable, sure, but it's the beginning of rightness as it's beginning to leave behind leftness, so to speak. So it's still part of the ajna binary. But here we have no ajna binary at all. So in Steve Rhodes style analysis, the ajna binary is caring what other people think. Here's someone who not only doesn't care what others think, they don't even want to care what others think. If we think of the nodes as what we strive for sometimes, striving to embody that, and ultimately just striving to surround ourselves with that. I think one of the great tricks of the nodes is when we try to be them as if they were our profile. So he might try to be a 6-2 when really he's a 5-2, and there's a difference. Yeah, they both have that second line hermit, but that fifth line does need to be out there and kind of in the fray sometimes. And then Rachel, yeah, has some great comments here. With his undefined sacral, so but being very powerful. I mean, 34, 14, and 9. Yeah, those are very powerful. It's a format gate. It's the gate of power, 34, and then 14 is also a gate of power, and they're both in Hades, and that 14 is basically being able to deal with a lot of material problems and shoulder a lot of burdens, and you see 14s being real workhorses for people quite a lot. But yeah, beautiful chart. I love his chart as well. And then Rachel says she's respect tones, but love people without them, and she respects them. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, even if we don't have some of the tones in our nodes, it doesn't mean we won't have some understanding of that kind of person. We'll just probably ultimately realize that we don't want to spend so much time around that, because the longer we spend, the more it's just natural to start trying to get the other to change. And it's so funny how the nodes are really how we see, it's not how they are. So if there's congruence between it, and if you have first and sixth tone nodes and you're around somebody who is a first and sixth tone, you have absolute congruence. It's like Dave is seeing the world, and what he likes to see is very competent, successful people who are also laid back and relaxed. And so when he sees that, it's perfect. But if he's around somebody who doesn't have that particular configuration, over time, he'll eventually be tempted to say, well, you should chill out a little bit, but also you should be successful and competent. It's so funny when you see these mixes, right? It's the mix of the splenic, which cares so much about competency. Like, I bet if you were just to look at all of the heart surgeons and, really high stress jobs, really highly paid attorneys, and people that are just in extremely stressful positions, you're not really going to find any feeling tones. You might find some respect tones. You're definitely going to find a lot of success tones, but you're not going to find tones 5 and 6. And it's just because it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to be under that much stress. It doesn't feel good to be that competitive. It doesn't feel good to have, it's like the quality of life suffers for those people. And tones 5 and 6 are very quality of life oriented. So based on this body graph and also from knowing Dave personally, I know that he's a quality of life guy, where he's happiest when he gets to spend time with friends and have a good time and kind of just do enjoyable things. Like, it is very simple in some ways, where the feeling tones, I mean, they're all simple in their own way. Like, the splenic tones feel good when they're winning, and they feel lousy when they're losing. The respect tones feel good when they're being understood and lousy when they're being misunderstood or they don't have anyone to connect with. The feeling tone, I think, just it's such a simple thing to say. It's almost funny how straightforward it is. if they have good food, a good meal, if they're comfortable or do something really enjoyable or laugh and just have good vibes with people, get to spend quality time, quality of life things, they're in a great mood. And it sounds so obvious to say that. It's like, wouldn't everyone be in a great mood? Well, not really. Not really. Some people need something else, right? But that is like when Dave got into town last time, he'd been driving for 11 hours and he was not doing great because it was physically uncomfortable in the car. So physical discomfort and missing a meal and things like that will actually affect this kind of awareness and brain system. And then something else that, like all transitional profiles, that Dave is a combination of having a sixth color mind and a first color body or a first color brain system. Sometimes Ra would say that the design external is the body and the design internal is the brain. Although I don't know how far we can go with that. That's one of the ways that Ra described the difference between Sun, Earth, and nodes, but certainly not the only way. Steve Rhodes prefers to say that the personality is more of the mind and the design is more of the body. But either way, I think it's clear that there's a bifurcation that all transitional profiles experience, which is that they have the sixth color on the personality side and the first color on the design side. And if Steve Rhodes is right about this, which I think he is, what it's saying is that personality is highly resilient, but that design is actually very fragile. So you have an interesting dichotomy. Yes, love to hear your comments, Rachel, please.
So this is actually a really elementary question. So all the transitional profiles are the ones that are the same harmonic, the 2-5, the 5-2, the 6-3, and they
Exactly.
have
Yes.
that weird opposite end of the spectrum. So they have the same on the profile, but the different on the notes. Is that correct?
Well, so the nodes are going to be, yeah, the nodes are completely on their own cycle where they're on an 18 and a half year cycle where every 9.25 years, like the north node goes to the south node and vice versa. And so the nodes are just kind of totally independent. Like there's no real pattern to the nodes. Like anyone could have any nodes. Any profile could have any nodes. I mean, but
Okay, yeah.
but you're
Well,
absolutely right that all the transitional profiles have the same color on the personality and design. And that's not too much of a,
so,
rudimentary
so what
question
is
at all. It's very,
so
yeah.
so the thing that is really trend is it's tonally then that at that level is where they have the like success and feeling or
Yeah,
whatever.
the tones can change. The tones absolutely can because each color has six tones. So the tones do have, there is a range of possible tones. But so, like, you're going to find some transitional profiles who are right variable, some are left variable, some are Ajna binary, some are, yeah, there's not going to be necessarily like a
So then is
pattern.
it
Yeah.
color level that it will always
It's the
be that?
color level that it's always fixed, and it has to do with
Okay.
the fact that there are 12 possible combinations of color. And so, of those 12 possible combinations, like, I guess there probably are rules for tone, just like there are for color as well. But at this level, what it's saying is that there's only one of those 12 possible combinations that's ever possible for any transitional profile, any 1, 4, 2, 5, 3, 6.
And that's about the color.
Yeah, yeah, and it just has to do with the math of the transitional profile being at the very end, right before it changes. Like Dave was born right before 6-2. So it's like the 5-1 for 21 hours, and then you have like an hour and 40 minutes or so of the 5-2 right at the very end of that as it gets ready to change to the 6-2. And
Okay,
so if
so
we just, yeah, if we just moved the time forward like an hour or who
with
knows how long, I mean, not far.
I'm so new studentish, so please forgive this question, but like, so what is the main thing about color?
Yeah, like what does color do and what is color? So
Yeah.
basically, color is the first step of going beneath the line. And so the way Ra described it was that color is really the threshold of awareness, that when we go beneath the line, we go to so when we're staying at line level, we're kind of looking at roles that we're playing in the world, and we can kind of read the lines and see, oh, these are different aspects of our personality, these are characteristics we have, and we're looking at the centers. Those are very much at the surface. Like you meet somebody and you have just kind of a connection to them, and you start to notice who has defined centers and what centers are defined and not. When you get to the color level and then beneath the color, it really gets to the question of awareness. And the idea is actually that, technically speaking, the neutrinos that we are bathing in, that we are filtering all the time, those neutrinos hit the crystals of consciousness. And what happens is we have these primary crystals of consciousness we call Percy and Desi, or the personality and the design, and those are in the head and the ajna. But actually, the design crystal, the kind of primary design crystal that we just call the design crystal, that it actually connects to a design crystal in every single cell in our entire body. And so we have just millions of crystals coming in and coming out and being recycled, and cells being born and cells dying, basically. We have this vast ecosystem where if you just, brush your finger, all the old cells go off and new ones start to form. And so it's really incredible what a living organism really is, because it's not just two crystals of consciousness, it's 2 billion or 2 trillion or something, or 10 trillion. So basically we have all these crystals of consciousness, and every single one of them, every cell in our body, is getting hit by neutrinos. And what happens is when those neutrinos go into the crystal, they only really go one at a time. And so the important ones for our studies are the personality and the design crystal, but really it's our entire body. It's not just those 2 crystals. But each crystal takes in its programming one neutrino at a time. And it is true that the personality and design crystal are the important ones. They're the ones we study, because the design crystal is kind of orchestrating the rest of the crystals. It's basically like calling the shots in some sense. It's coordinating them. So it's the one getting programmed, getting filtered, and so is the personality. And what's happening is, as the neutrinos are coming in, either they're coming in from, they're kind of carrying information from the cosmos, they're coming from stars, or they're coming from the sun, or they're coming from Jupiter, or they're neutrinos that were like ambient neutrinos that came from one of those sources and then passed through another person and then passed through us. So that's what's amazing, is that the neutrino moves at near speed of light, and it's actually passing through. If we were to see the amount of neutrinos, it's like 400,000 per cubic inch per second or something ridiculous, right? So yeah, and the question, do all design crystals come from the same bundle in the Earth's mantle? Yes, they do, and that's a great question, Nicola, because when we learn about the crystals of consciousness, we learn that the personality crystals bundle into different bundles, but the design crystal is all one. And I think that one kind of takeaway from this is that when you read Taoism, or when you look at any particular kind of form, principle, system, they all pretty much agree with each other. But when you look at personality crystal systems, they all favor one of their 16 paths. And there's kind of 16 eternally competing paths, or eternally conflicting ways. So there's like 16 paths to the enlightenment of the personality, but there's only one path for the design, in some sense. Yeah, a comment?
So basically, all the transitional profiles, all the ones that have the same harmonic 2552, 63, 36, 1441, all will have colors at opposite ends of the spectrum, a 1 and a 6 or something like that, correct?
Yeah, but it'll always be the same opposites. Like there's nobody who has a 1 on the personality side and a 6 on the design. It'll always be a 6th color on the personality and a 1st color on the design every time.
That's so amazing to me, because the people that I know that have this configuration are like such curious mysteries to me. And like the fact that having the most, like I think of the 1 and the 2 as very ancient styles of being. Like I think of the 1 and the 2, the caveman diet and the hunter gatherer diet, as very like ancient bodies. Like the people that I know that are like that, they also have like a almost like primordial body. Like there's something about their body that is like more old in a weirdly like the way that it's built kind of way. And it's not just like, it's not a like a diss in any capacity. I actually prefer it personally. But then like, and then the personality side being so advanced, it's just like this weird dissonance. And then come what that produces at the line level is this harmonic that is so unique and weird and rare. Like those harmonic profiles are really like 3%. Like the 6 3s and the 3 6s and the 2 5s and the 5 2s and the 1
Yeah.
4s and the 1s are like very rare in like coming out. Like it's not often that you get those types of personalities. So I just think it's so, and I don't even know what to make of it, but I just think it's so unique that these like d- really great differences on this color level produce a harmonic on the line level. And it's just like
Yeah.
fascinating to me. And I don't even know what to think of it yet. And I'm just like coming to this awareness now. So forgive me for this like weird aha moment in this
Well, it's
chat.
also it's also
Yeah,
saying that they have to be, if you're thinking about filters and just talking about how we're all kind of filtering in different ways. I mean, how the actual crystals themselves are literally filtering, but also we can use that as a metaphor for how different people kind of take in information and then process it and then express it. And thinking of it as what kinds of filters the transitional profiles are, they're here to be innocent. And then with that first color on the design side, like you're saying, the cave person body, they're really here to be very pure in that sense, to not have been polluted by all of the fast food and junk food and processed food and all of the things that we have in our modern times. So they're here to be this really innocent, clean filter on the personality level, and to just take things in one at a time in a very simplistic way, and to take in the most fundamental on the design side. So just thinking big picture, like how a 5-2 is kind of there to be a bridge between the 5-1 process and the 6-2 process. And they're made to be a clean bridge.
yeah, it's almost like in order to be that bridging personality, you have to be the most pure version of whatever it is that you're representing to do the thing that is required to be the bridge. You know,
Yeah.
it's like that
Yeah.
validity of the bridge of whatever that thing, that harmonic of that 2 to 5 or 6 to 3 or 1 to 4 is. It's really beautiful,
Mhm.
and I'm so grateful for this awareness in this chat because I didn't really totally get it before. I had kind of like thought maybe, oh, is this a thing? But now I'm like, oh yeah, this is a thing, like for sure.
Oh, it's definitely worth studying, and it's really interesting to think about the role of the transitional profile, and just especially adding the Steve Rhodes layer to it of like, what an interesting dichotomy. There's nobody, like, if you look at the color combinations and then use the Steve Rhodes keynotes, he basically says colors 1 and 2 are low resilience, 3 and 4 medium, 5 and 6 are high resilience. Well, that means you have people that are double low resilience, you have people that are a combination of medium and low, you have double medium resilience like me, you have a combination of high and medium, you have double high resilience, and then you have this one weird type that is high and low. It's the only one. It's the only one of the 12 possible combinations, and it's highest resilience on the mind. So it's kind of, in some ways, it's nice for them to be on the internet because they can be exposed to a lot of different opinions and not be bored, right? Because it's very boring for a high resilience person to see the same thing all the time. They want difference. The way Rhodes describes the low resilience is that it doesn't have a lot of tolerance for difference, but it can be offended by that. And I've heard people with double low resilience get kind of hurt by that statement and say, "Well, that's not true. I have a strong tolerance for different opinions." And then I'm like, "Okay, but this is Rhodes's opinion. Just a different opinion is all. You don't have to agree with it, you know." So it's kind of one of those funny catch-22s of like the opinion itself that they haven't have a problem with opinions. It's like that's not true, you know. I'm very tolerant. I'm a very tolerant person. So I think the caveat is you can be a very tolerant person. You might just not enjoy people arguing, for instance. And I think a lot of lower resilience people will identify with that, even if they say, "Oh yeah, I'm very tolerant of opinions," but still I don't really see the point in arguing. I'd rather just learn from someone what they think, and in that way. So oh well, thank you, Pockets. Thank you for validating that. And I mean, I feel really special with my low resilience friends because, well, for one thing, I'm drawn to low resilience people because I have survival view. So my personality is actually oriented to see and appreciate first color. I mean, that's what survival is. And so anyone who has survival view or who has possibility view is naturally going to be drawn to the lower resilience. Same with anyone who's caves or markets. So, but for me, I mean, I feel really special because I'm let into their circle, so to speak. I'm let into their group, And it does feel different. It does. I mean, it does feel like with lower resilience, they're just going to have less people in their life overall, and that's healthy for them to have less people and to have a smaller circle. And so you do feel luckier to be a part of that circle because you are kind of let in a way that not everybody is. So, yeah, yeah, but
Can I just
yeah, go on.
confirm, is it the color that you're talking about?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
is it
absolutely. So
for
we could,
all of
yeah, yeah. And
like
that's just kind of something
four?
that Steve Rhodes noticed, which is that, well, and I guess this is actually a good segue back to just the question of what color is in human design and then how Steve Rhodes sort of augmented that understanding. So to get back to Rachel's original question of kind of what is color, the approach from awareness is that it has to do with your awareness or that it is where we start to see the awareness in the body graph. But obviously, on the design side, that's a little bit different because we talk about color being your dietary regimen and your environment. And so those don't really seem like awareness, but they kind of are. They kind of are in a way. It's a frequency that you notice and you tune into and you bring awareness to. But then to look at Steve Rhodes and his augmentation of it. So the technical way of describing what the color is as we're filtering the neutrinos is actually the exit frequency, not the entrance frequency. So the neutrinos come in, they hit at what we call base. Inside the crystal is tone. And then as the neutrino exits the crystal, that's what we call color. And the idea is that if you're really living your design and you're eating correctly and in the right environment and all of these things, that the color will allow the tone to exit cleanly. And it will allow the tone to exit without distortion. And one way of thinking of that is that you can imagine the tone as a little holographic video, kind of like Princess Leia from Star Wars, like this little pop-up video. And you can imagine, say, a ballet dancer. And as that ballet dancer is dancing, their personality crystal and their design crystal inside have a little holographic 3D image of their entire body. And furthermore, every single cell in their body has a tiny little holographic image of the whole body. And so as they're doing these pirouettes and doing this ballet dancing, and they're not making any mistakes and it's totally flawless, you can imagine that that crystal clear image of the tone is coming out through the color. It's like being filtered and it's exiting in a very clean, perfect way. The color transference is kind of like the flinching or a misstep or when you're playing a flute and you accidentally hit the octave or something like that. And that flinch of the color transference, suddenly that tone gets all fuzzy and can't come out, and suddenly that person stumbles and falls because they're not able to maintain that sort of perfect equanimity and composure in their movements and so on. So, I mean, one way to think of it is that the tone is literally this holographic representation of the entire body. And that's why when we see intelligence, what we're really seeing is somebody where every action they take is a microcosm of that intelligence and all the micro texture of how they're acting and speaking and so on, we can kind of see their intelligence. Like it's clear. We don't need an IQ test to see how smart someone is. We just kind of watch their intelligence work. But we can also see how the color can transfer. And in that moment of color transference, all of that intelligence is lost. And all of the tonal architecture, what we call tonal architecture, which is really the roots of that intelligence, can't make it through because the color is kind of blocking it from coming out. And so color transference is probably the most obviously seen on the personality side, where it's your personality sun earth that transfers. And you can actually subjectively experience that. You can subjectively notice that. And you can actually say what it's like to experience that. And it's something that flickers and you notice it go there and you kind of have to bring it back. I mean, it's kind of, I'll try to think of a good example, but it's like you have one track and then you get off that track. And so an example, if you're fear motivation, your track is the fear that motivates how do I know? How have I checked enough to make sure this is going to work? Like, is this going to work? Yes. Well, how do I know it's going to work? Because I've done this. Well, what happens if that breaks? Well, I have this backup. What happens if that backup breaks? I have another backup. What happens if that breaks? Well, I don't need to go there. And then why not? Because the experts say that's too many layers of safety net. Or, they need to have an answer for every single thing down to like exactly why. That's all fear. And that's really healthy for a fear person. And so if a fear person comes to you and they're asking you a question, you say, well, how do you know that? That's a great question to ask them. Well, how have you verified that? Well, how are you going to do that? I mean, all of these how questions keep them from getting sidetracked and pulled into their transference. However, they can flicker into need. And instead of how, they start thinking of what needs to happen and what needs haven't been met. And they start to look at what doesn't yet exist and where the gaps are. You know, this town needs this, and you really need a good coat for that. You need a hat for this. What somebody needs to make, it's like they get into this whole different world where they're no longer on the mission of how to do it. They're not aware of how, and they're not checking how they know. They're not afraid that it's going to break, and so they're not like thinking, how do I make sure it works if it breaks, or how do I make sure, like they've just completely lost that whole track and they're stuck in need. Now the same is true for a need person who will get stuck in the most irrational fears. And they'll get, although with need it's a special case because the fourth color transfers always and can transfer to any of the colors more easily. But you'll still see that. You'll see a need person who's like really afraid of something, like something that wouldn't happen. So they're kind of thinking of, well, how do we know this? But they're not asking the right how questions. There's no intelligence behind it. They're just like, how do we know we aren't going to get sued by the government for this? And it's like, well, they don't do that. But they're asking, how do we know for something that would never possibly happen? And they're not paying attention to what their job is, which is to bring awareness to need, to what needs happening that nobody else knows needs happening. So it's kind of, what are we here to bring our awareness to? And really that's the answer for that. And then the way that Steve Rhodes changed it was he said that actually this has to do with our resilience. And so he's not totally disagreeing, because there's a way that there's simpatico, because what it's basically saying is, when people have been through a lot of trauma and they are not able to function, they can get locked in their transference. And that's something that Ra actually talked about. He said that they get obsessive. And when you meet someone who has an obsessive quality, you notice that obsession. You notice it as kind of, wow, this is like, this person's obsessed with conspiracy theories, or this person's obsessed with this or that thing. And that obsession can be getting locked into the transference, and it can be very harmful for someone. They get obsessed about aliens or obsessed about some obscure topic, and what it represents to them is bringing their awareness to this place of transference where they really have no intelligence. What it's really saying is that we're each designed to have access to intelligence through a very narrow channel, and that very narrow channel is our color. And when that color transfers, we kind of go out of bounds, and suddenly we have the same awareness that anyone would have, unless they actually are of that color. It's like home turf, right? Like if we're in our home turf, we have this home turf advantage, and we have all this endless intelligence that we can get from that. We're just naturally really good at that. But when we go outside of our home turf, we don't have any advantage at all. We're just bringing a kind of homogenized awareness. So everyone has homogenized access to all of the motivations. Everyone, like, I don't have fear as motivation, but I have a homogenized access to it. How do I know I have enough water to take with me on this trip in case the car breaks down? Okay, that's a basic one. Like, if you're going on a long road trip, check the oil. And there's certain like homogenized wisdom. Just because it's homogenized doesn't mean it's bad. It's collective. I mean, it's something that everyone should do. You're going on a long trip, check the gas, check the fluids of the car, make sure you have enough water, make sure you have a blanket in case the car breaks down. There's all this like stuff you do to be safe. But that's just, you don't really need to think about that. Someone who actually has fear as a motivation, they are equipped to bring their awareness to everything that could go wrong that you don't even think of, and to know what to do, and all these things. So it's really like that's kind of the crux of it, is we each have our own gift that we can give to others, particularly when we're talking about personality sun earth. That's what it's there for. It's there to motivate others, to be a gift for other people. So the mind can kind of do that. And then I think it's very compatible with what Rhodes says about resilience, because if you're low resilience and go through a lot of trauma, you're not going to be able to stay in that color motivation, or or on the design side, you're going to have some problem where, yeah, it's not going to let that intelligence out, and it's not going to you're going to have to work through that trauma to access it, because it is kind of this filter standing in the way of our intelligence. Like, our intelligence is locked away. The level of tone is locked away deep down inside. And to access the intelligence, we need color. And if you're low resilience and have been through a lot of trauma, or if you're high resilience and you're extremely bored and not being challenged, because those are kind of equivalent, right? A high resilience person who doesn't have enough stuff going on that will actually challenge them, their intelligence is also going to be locked away, and they're going to be very dull. So there's this idea that to access the innate intelligence, we access it through color. On the design side, that's through determination and environment, and on the personality side, it's through view and motivation. And then Pocket says she's fear motivated and how questions stress her out. And yes, trauma. Thanks for giving her something to journal and contemplate about. Yeah, well, I mean, the how question, I think, is just realizing that you are equipped to really get down to that ultimately all hows are how do you know? Because even if I say how do you do this, you tell me how, then I'm like, how do you know that's how you do it? So how is always related to knowing. And obviously there can be situations where, like with an undefined ajna, you're not here to put a lot of energy into the knowing things and figuring things out in that way and so on. But regardless of that, I think all fear people are here to think about or bring awareness to how they know various things, how they've checked things, and just kind of keep in that awareness. And I think that's why it's also important for them to have familiar things, because you won't be stressed out when I'm asking you how you know something that you know really well, right? Yeah, that's a good point as well, Rachel. How to make it and how to survive, which is that survival view. But yeah, that's what I'm saying is, for Steve Rhodes, what he added to this is that colors 1 and 2 need familiar. They need familiarity. They need a small group of family, a small group of friends, a small group of people that they trust, and it takes time to build that trust and all this stuff. And it's like the familiarity. Like, if you're getting stressed out, yeah, absolutely, it's stressed out being asked about things you don't know. But if you know it like the back of your hand, then it'll be, oh, that's easy. So I think that's part of it, is realizing that when you have the lower colors, you're not going to get bored. Your great advantage is you don't get bored. So you are able to just really be present with something and deep with something in a way that a higher resilience person wouldn't. They would get bored and they would move on, because they would just say, I'm done with that. I need something new. I'm going crazy staring at the same thing every day. But the low resilience person, they can get to know it so well that then it's not stressful when someone asks you how you know, because you say, well, I've tried every different way of knowing and this is the best one. Or, I've been working on it for 15 years and this is the best solution I've come up with. And so it's so familiar because you're not bored with it. You're not having to move on so quickly. Any other comments? We can open up. I wasn't sure if you had a new comment, Rachel, please.
So, yes, Jonah, I was thinking about, like, I'm still trying to get my head around the differences between color and tone and line and bass. But so, like, I'm really understanding with this talk that color is really related to, and correct me if I'm miscorrect in this, that color is really related to what we externalize, our outer,
Yeah, the
like,
personality sun earth color is. Absolutely. I mean, so is the line, so is the tone. Like, I guess everything, I guess what we externalize is very much personality sun earth. And I was using that, even though we look at 4 positions of color, we look at both personality and design sun earth and personality and design nodes. So those are the 4 areas that we primarily look at color. Then, of course, there's color resonance in the magic square. So that's also, so I mean, like, color really is used in all of those areas, but the personality sun earth is kind of one of the most important ones. I mean, I don't want to say more important, but it's one of the most accessible
well,
and the closely
but what
related
I'm
to awareness, because
Yeah,
technically it's all awareness, but it's kind of hard to see how the environment is awareness also, right? It's kind of
right.
a weird idea.
So like tone is super personal. It's super internal. It's super interior. It's like you can't really transfer tone. You can transfer color. You can like
Well,
shift.
yeah, and the transference also is kind of what it doesn't mean even externalize. The transference, the way Ra uses it, I think is kind of borrowed from psychoanalysis, where the transference is kind of this muddying up or mixing with the opposite, like the transference between the the client, right? I mean, I don't know, but
Yeah,
yeah,
but even
but the
then,
tone is deep inside, and tone does not transfer.
right. So even if color transfer is totally imagined, it's still like taking in the external versus like being an innate thing. Like I feel like tone is so much more like a personalized, innate, like more design, more beingness part of like who you are versus
Well,
color.
it's related. Yeah, well, tone is also kind of like the senses. Like there wouldn't be any. I mean, if we think about color as this higher level between the senses and the, I guess ultimately it's what we have awareness, and our awareness can take in information from the senses on the design side. And there are also senses on the personality side. That's the funny thing. So, looking at pockets here, we see on the design side, her primary sense is smell. But on the personality side, her primary sense is that's going to be uncertainty. And so it's so different. It's like funny to even think of what are the personality equivalents of the senses, smell, taste, vision, like these senses that we all kind of know, which in human design there are six senses, and the six senses are smell, taste, outer vision, inner vision, feeling, and touch. And so there's no hearing, but hearing is kind of like throughout all of them. Like maybe even the reason it's called tone. Normally we think of tone as something that you hear, and that sound has to do with frequency. And so there is no sense dedicated to sound. The closest we have maybe is feeling, which is kind of interesting too, that like hearing is feeling. You can't really hear without feeling. That hearing someone's voice as they ask for help or something like that can make you feel certain ways, or hearing songs can elicit feeling. But anyway, yeah, we realize that is what tone actually is on the design side, and then you can kind of translate that to the personality side to try to imagine what are the senses of the personality, which is an interesting idea, right?
Also,
Like,
they
yeah.
say that like the last sense to leave you when you're dying is your hearing. So like that's why people are like whispering into like comatose hospice patients' ears because it is like our last sense that like stays with us on this earth.
That makes
Um,
so much sense because it's kind of the sense of sense. Like all senses are of frequency, all senses are heard. Your nose is just hearing with its nostrils, your eyes are just hearing with their eyeballs, and so on.
exactly. It's like this deep vibratory, like receptive. It like hearing is like all the senses are receptive, but like hearing is the most maybe widely receptive. Like it like the hearing sense can go the furthest versus the smell and the sight and the feeling and all of that. But so like the thing that I was really wanting to ask before was like, so color really is what we're putting out. It's kind of linked to our outer authority, would you say? As like,
I would say the Sun Earth and the whole personality side has more to do with the outer earth, or the personality Sun Earth. What I would say with color is that it's you can kind of tell when you see somebody who's clumsy, or who just like intelligence isn't just in talking, and intelligence isn't just in, I don't know, solving math problems or solving logic puzzles or something like that. Like intelligence is really a whole body thing. It's a full body thing, and it's kind of funny. I think there's even probably some sketch comedy, about this throughout the years, of someone who looks really smart and then they stop talking and they're not smart at all, and what a difference that would be, like if when they start talking the intelligence is somehow, the illusion of intelligence is broken. But I think what that's saying is really that the intelligence on the design side is when the tone can make its way to the body's awareness. And so the body is very aware of itself because the color is not in transference. So the color is almost like a lens that can get broken. And I think this is where Steve Rhodes comes in, where he says people who've been through a lot of trauma, it's like the color level got broken. Now the intelligence can't get out anymore. It can't reach the top. And so I think what you're talking about was saying how it's something that's externalized is really the aura is externalized. Like no matter whether we're speaking or whatever we're doing or however we're moving, you watch somebody walk across the room and sit down in a chair and drink a cup of coffee, you're seeing their intelligence. You're seeing how their body moves, and you sit with them and you're feeling their aura, and their aura is very much related to the color, because when that tone can get through, that means that their color is kind of operating cleanly to let out a really clean frequency. You're noticing their intelligence as a frequency that's coming out. So I think that's what you're saying about the externalized or the outer authority. But technically, the outer authority is more in the personality Sun Earth, because that's kind of the point that it is trying to make. All of my aura is supporting that point, but the point I'm trying to make is the point that a color 3 person makes. Color 3 desires the priest. I'm making the point of live your design and trust that by living your design you'll have a better life and things like that, like kind of like the priestly point. My aura supports that, so if you meet me in person or you're watching me here through video and audio, you have these little hints of what kind of person I am and where my intelligence does come out, or where I'm not able to access that. It's more like, can I access it or not? And certain things will happen, and I will get pulled into innocence sometimes because I'll be really involved in something and something will pull me out of it. And then I'll get really curious to kind of look around. And you'll see that no matter how far you're in desire, every now and then you have to go into innocence, because it's like pulling your head out of the sand and like looking around a little bit. But it's only when I get stuck there and stuck in the curiosity of wanting to see what's going on that I have no intelligence to offer. And then you ask me a question and I'm able to get back to the desire. It's kind of like I need stakes. I need, to have anything smart to say, I need to actually know what the stakes are. And when I'm in innocent conjecture, I don't really have much to say that's much different than what people just normally say. I kind of just say the normal things to say, like, oh yeah, it makes sense, check it out. It kind of is just empty speech. So that's kind of an interesting game you can play with yourself, is notice or like in the case of Pockets here, for her noticing fear versus need. Now, are you also desire, Rachel? Should I pull up your chart here?
No, I'm actually a hope motivation,
Oh, your
and
hope.
I
Okay, let me.
guilt as a transference. And so I wanted to ask you this question. So, like, I've heard that, like, so Steve Rhodes is kind of like, okay, the transference motivation is like your second choice. Like when you're like picking electives in middle school, it's
Yeah.
like your second choice.
If I
Like,
can't do
you
this,
want
I'll do it that way. Exactly.
you really wanted art, but you fucking got drama. So
Yeah.
it's like is it okay? Or I got my third elective choice of music, and it was like, yeah, I really wanted drama. But but in your view, Jonah,
Yeah.
is the transference thing okay as a second view, or is it really detrimental? Because I will tell you this, I'm a
Yeah.
hope motivation. And when I deal with people in my life that are guilt motivation, my best friend from high school, my mom, I hate them. I
Oh.
hate fucking them so much, and the way
Uh,
it makes me feel. And also, when I'm making decisions from a guilt point of view versus a hope point of view, I really trust the hope point of view so much more. And the guilt point of view, I'm like a wreck making guilt decisions. Like
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
good. Like
No,
I don't.
I totally get it. And also, I mean, it raises interesting questions like if you're designed to be lower resilience and it's healthy for you to have more familiarity because you don't get bored as easily, and it's healthy for you to kind of have a smaller world, and then the guilt people in your life are high resilience people. Funny enough, you're drawn to them because your nodes have fifth color on both sides, right? Which is kind of funny.
Yes.
So you're just going to have a lot of them in your life.
Yeah, and these bitches are both high resilience. They
Well,
are.
apparently you like them, even though you might not think you
I
do.
love them.
Like,
They're my mom and my best friend
okay, well
from.
there you go. So that's kind of part of it though, is like this funny twist of you can be so annoyed by them, but also apparently you're really drawn to them. Is this idea because of those nodes. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a great question, and the way I understand what Rhodes is saying is really he is trying to he's doing his typical innocence thing where he's trying to kind of not take sides and trying to challenge who's to say one's better than the other, and who's to say that someone who is in their transference, right? Because Ra is like very clear about it. He's like, if you're in your transference, you have nothing intelligent to offer the world at all. All you can offer the world is the same thing anyone could offer the world in that same situation, which is like this very superficial, homogenized, generic advice. So for Ra to actually get to what is the real advice or what you would really tell somebody or what you could really help them with, you need to be in your true motivation. So for you, as hope, that is the guru. And the guru helps prepare others for the call and prepare others for their life purpose. And for you to really be able to do that with other people, you need to be in your hope and not transferring to the guilt and not trying to fix things and so on. So I tend to agree with Ra more than Steve Rhodes in this because Steve Rhodes isn't really, he's just kind of playing devil's advocate because that's what he's designed to do because he's innocence and he likes to play devil's advocate and he likes to just say, well, how do we know one's better than the other, kind of. That they're just, they go hand in hand. Like they're two, they're a pair. And yeah, like somebody who's in desire is going to have to go to innocence anyway because one fuels the other. It's like desire can't just be in desire all the time. Hope can't be in hope all the time. Every now and then it has to look at what could be fixed and what can't be fixed, even just if it's just to get to gather information about what's worth hoping for. So I think that's really the point is if you're mostly in your hope, certain people will pull you into guilt. It's impossible not to. Like if you are talking to them or hanging out with them, they will at some point pull you into guilt. And what that will look like is you getting really active and fired up about stuff. And then you'll kind of remind yourself you don't need to be that active about fixing it, that actually your awareness is more about what's changing or not. And a guilt person has no idea what's changing or not. They have no awareness in that
My
realm.
God, this is so right on. I've
Yeah.
just totally had like such a fucking brainstorm mind like explosion because these people that I have in my life that are highly guilt motivated, when I get off the phone with them or when I quit conversation with them, I go deeply into my hope motivation. Like it propels me to go like, and I feel that for all of the motivations because the people that I know that are either desire or innocence, it's like those are so different. It's like the hope and the guilt are so different. The fear and the need are less different in my perception. I'm like, those seem kind of similar to me, but like the other two of the harmonics seem like total opposites. But what the other like ping pong does is it like solidifies like the other side like in a weird way. It's like, yeah, this innocent shit is bullshit. Let me get in touch with what I really need. Like, yeah, this guilt shit is like it needs to be rejected. Let me focus on what is like actually like the positive thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like gathering information, and you could see all of them that way, where fear gathers the information about what needs to happen, but then it doesn't stay in that place of what really needs to happen. As soon as it knows what needs to happen, now it can get about its actual business, which is figuring out how to make it work. Yeah, yeah,
This has been amazing, mind-blowing session. Thank you so much, Jonah. This has been so
oh,
powerful
I'm
on
so
the
glad. I'm so glad. And this is actually perfect for Hanifa's question that I just scrolled to, where she's talked about transference of need to fear. And yeah, that is something I've seen going both directions. And I think fear to need is basically someone who is being too focused on like the bigger questions of does this really need to happen or what's needed for overall success and so on. And they just really need to get back to the implementation details because they're really only going into need to kind of get their marching orders. Now, someone who's in need, they're going to periodically need to go into fear, but that's only going to be like they get stuck somewhere and they just need to figure out like how do I know what is needed? Like this very fundamental thing of okay, I know we need this, I know we need this, I know we need this. now I don't know what else we need, so I temporarily go into fear. But the problem is, if they stay in fear, they're going to basically have all sorts of irrational fears. So the transference of need to fear is somebody who's afraid of completely irrational things, like their like imagination is kind of carried away with them, and they don't they're kind of carried away by it, and they don't really know what to be afraid of, so they end up preparing for all the wrong things and stuff like that. So the other interesting point about need is that need is made to always transfer and kind of move anywhere. So it is a bit of a special case and kind of an unusual one. So, I mean, the way I look at it is just that need is ultimately the master, and so the, being a master, they're here to give the other person what they needed to hear. So I love hearing Elokanand Diaz. I love hearing his answers to people because he always answers based on what's needed, not based on some formula from their chart, not based on knowing how to apply a technique. Like, it's almost that need can transfer to any color because it can use any tool for the job. Because the master needs to use the heavy handed tools for the people that are dull, and it needs to use the soft touch for the people that are sensitive, and it needs to use some people are too worried and need to stop, and others aren't worried and need to start. And so that's what the need is all about. Ultimately, they're here to be the master. And so hearing Alokanand Diaz, who is a master, how he answers questions, he's not even just answering what the person needs to hear, he's answering what the whole room needs to hear. And hearing him do readings for multiple people, you really get like you get a lot of nuggets for yourself because it's something you needed to hear. And he almost like he's talking to you, even though he's talking to them, and it's a totally different chart. It's amazing. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts, Nicola.
Yeah, I had a question around the transference. So I've heard that like having like need motivation and transferring to fear is actually the most difficult on the body because they're two foundation lines.
Hmm.
Have you heard that?
I haven't, but that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that yeah, that's interesting. That because it's weird that it's like fixed, but it's always moving. I mean, I don't know. The fourth color
Yeah.
can move to any of the other colors. I know that, and I just think of it like is it somehow to do that job you need to have that flexibility so that Alok can sometimes really harp on people and make them more afraid. Other times he can make them really hopeful. Other times he can galvanize them to fix things, or other times he can get them. It's kind of just like being able to move fluidly into any. That's what the master can do. The master can go anywhere and have something intelligent to say or something to do. So I just think of it as not really losing as much by going into the transference, but I have seen need people locked in the transference to fear. And I think being locked in the transference is different. I think it's totally normal and healthy to kind of go into the transference and come out of it, but people get locked in, and that's where you find actual mental illness, where people have obsessions that have lasted years and years, and they have phobias and obsessions and these kind of complexes built up typically around the transference. People who are obsessed with aliens, which is an innocence thing, but they're actually desire, and they're totally locked in to the aliens world, kind of. So that would be an example of that.
Yeah, I had a session with Brayton Belazzo a couple years ago, and he's need motivation as well. And I was telling him about this particular thing that was so having need, I didn't know what was happening, but he's like, it sounds like you're in transference because it can be so challenging, where it's like it just feels like the sky is falling, quite literally, when I'm in transference as a need person. But I also notice it, so and sort of I know what to do in that case, which is basically just shut everything down and have a nap or something until I can rectify myself. But I've even noticed in other cases where I really go into asking all of those how questions, like you were talking about, just to kind of mitigate this decision I'm trying to make where I'm not actually listening to my authority. I have a specific example for this. But yeah, that's where I sort of go into transference, and I've made mistakes and around that for sure. I've made decisions that were incorrect, but I have learned a great deal, I suppose, and it's really helpful to know, like, I'm really being able to discern when it's just clean and clear inside me, and I'm not feeling the need to ask all these questions and do all this research and do all these things. And yeah. So it'd
Yeah,
be
I mean,
pretty.
I'll notice it really for me with where I just am kind of going along and I have my goal, and then every now and then, it's not very common, but I used to notice this more where someone would just say, usually like an innocence person or just someone who's kind of innocently like, oh, that's not, you don't need to worry about that, or just kind of that kind of thing. It's like lulling, like I getting lulled into a false sense of security of, I don't worry about it, kind of pacifying. And it was funny because James Alexander has this idea which I've been experimenting with for a couple of years now since he originally told me, and it seems to be true. I don't know that I use it all the time, but he talks about 1, 3, and 5 being active and 2, 4, and 6 are passive. And I guess this just has some continuity with the lines. I definitely do have some. I mean, I do a very similar way. When I look at the lines, I look at the yin and yang versions. So, like, what's yin fixed versus yang fixed? But it's exactly opposite for me, where like first line is yin, so it would be passive. First color is very active. So weirdly, it's like the inverse. The the yeah, so that the colors are the kind of the opposite of the lines in terms of active and passive. And that would be an interesting one because, I mean, and again, I haven't done this a ton. It's just something I kind of notice of if your need, that is one of the passive ones. And so the idea is that hope, need, and innocence are all passive. And so they're passive processes. Hope is basically anticipating change, which is a passive process. You're just seeing that the change is coming or seeing what's not going to change. That need is also passive because you're noticing what's missing. So you have to observe that it's very observant. So you're noticing what's not there, what needs need to be met. And then 6 is innocence, and that's the purest passivity of just pure observation, of just noticing things. And then you have fear, which is fixing, and you kind of have your goal in mind. How do I do it? Desire, which is also very much about having a goal and trying to achieve that goal. And then guilt, which is about fixing things that are getting in the way of it. Or so it's like these 3 active and 3 passive. And so the way James Alexander teaches it is to notice when the active has become the passive or vice versa. Notice, so if you have one of the passive ones, you're
Mm.
naturally passive and you notice. So for me, my desire will naturally be engaged. Then I notice, oh, why bother? It's not my business. It's not my place to say anything. Somebody else will deal with it. It's kind of like bystander effect. Like as a desire person, my transference is going into bystander effect. So yeah, I mean that's another perspective on it. I see a few comments here, and I'm not sure if Richard has his call today or if that was a mistake. I didn't realize he had it scheduled, but I know he did a keynoting session yesterday, and I don't think he'd have 2 back to back. So I don't know if you jumped back on, Ricky. Yeah, I see you're back on, Ricky. Sorry about that. I guess I don't know. Yeah, I messaged him to see, but it looks like he isn't. But yeah, some fun comments. Thank you, Rachel. And yeah, I love talking about the yin and yang of the lines and the active and passive of the colors, and these are kind of things that I like to assemble. I think it's my 952. I really love assembling things together, and that's something that I've been doing on the Signpost website. So I hope you'll all check it out and tell me what you think. I've been hard at work on it. I'm going to post the information again. Um, you can create your own account by following the links on the sign-in page, which is totally fine to do, and that'll let you have your own body graphs and everything, or you can just use the shared account. And basically, I do hope to have resources where you can kind of go to the color research page, and it will have something from James Alexander talking about active and passive, and it will have Steve Rhodes talking about resilience. It'll have, obviously we can't use Ra's material directly, but we can use his keynotes and things like that. So it will have kind of his versions of it and so on. So I do hope to make it a research center like that. So yeah, sorry about that, Ricky. I know Richard did one yesterday, and I guess he must have just had 2 or a scheduling thing. He's been out of town he's been in Mexico, and so we had some scheduling stuff moving around. And I'll make sure, yeah, I will end that one. I guess if he's not, yeah, he would be on now. So that is a mistake, but I'm glad we all had time to look at some things here. So yeah, maybe I'll look one more. I'm going to go back to pockets here. So just maybe this would be a good one to kind of end on. Let's just do traditional and then Steve Rhodes analysis of the colors, and we can just kind of look at the two ways of looking at that. I see your E there. So the traditional way, we really start, there's the four transformations, and we start on the design sun earth, then design nodes, then personality nodes, then personality sun earth. And so really on the design side, traditionally we just look at determination, and then the tone has to do with the variable. So the variable is kind of seen as more important, or that's, we would basically look at open taste here, and the open taste kind of being somebody who, I guess Ra basically said they suffer a lot less from their early life than the closed taste because it's a trajectory. So the open taste moves toward open from closed. So earlier in life, they're more resistant to trying things they don't like, and that actually protects them and is really good for them. So even though Ra never said colors 1 and 2 are low resilience and need familiarity, he does talk a lot about, like for instance, closed taste or even open taste in this case, needing to not have a large variety of food and needing to have familiar foods. And then also later Ra would talk about determination not just being diet, but how we take in information. So taking in from a limited number of places and taking in the same information or similar kinds of information or things like that. So again, that theme of familiarity. The first tone is smell. So we would kind of look at smell as a sense that carries extra information with it. And so that would be something to notice as a signpost for pockets, that as she's eating less variety of food and kind of being more fixed and seasonal in the food patterns, that there would also be this development of the sense of smell that is much stronger maybe than she's had before, and she could kind of track the sense of smell as that. And then there's also a stream, the stream of smell that it relates to, which is 5432 and then 4426. And so I don't think anyone's really figured out the formula for how to interpret this, but there are going to be, like, I guess what at the mechanical level is her gate 32 and 26 activation, at the awareness level also relates to that tone. And really just understanding what first tone is here for. It is for survival, and smell can really help survive. It can help smell who you can trust or not, and smell a rat, and smell, basically smell loyalty and smell support and smell success, the sweet smell of success. So there's this whole language that we have around smell and the tribal. And so, so that the kind of conventional analysis is to just look at the determination and really understand, like, this is a left variable brain system, probably going to need a lot of calories, probably going to need to eat regularly, things like that. And just kind of be very active, right? We look at the keynotes of the left variable here. So very active, and kind of that would be the conventional way to look at that. And then we would go to the environment, which is wet kitchens. And for wet kitchens with tone 2, that tone is taste. At the environment level, we would kind of look for qualities in that environment. So a tone 2 environment can really benefit from having windows opened, getting fresh air, things like that. So the traditional kind of analysis would be to look at the tone as an aspect of the environment, and also that it's a left variable environment. So it's a busy environment where people are busy working and they might not even notice you come and go. And they're just kind of, there's a lot of activity going on, and you're not being lulled. Like how I talked about how my desire can be lulled into a false sense of security with innocence, so too can the left variable be lulled into a slow death by couch potatoes and people kind of sitting around and not working and not doing things. So it's nice to be around a certain amount of bustle. This is a hardscape environment, so it's also designed to be around more auras, to be able to handle a lot of different auras and not get colds and stuff. Whereas the landscape people, typically can't be around as many auras, and they pick up colds more and stuff like that. But yeah, this wet kitchen's humidity. So if you're not in a humid place, I guess Portland's pretty humid, so you're pretty good out there. But definitely taking a lot of showers and having a lot of saunas and steam rooms and stuff like that. Just the humidity is important. Buying a humidifier possibly. And then symbolically, when you look at kitchens, these are real hodgepodge melting pot environments where there's a lot of transformation going on, a lot of mutation. And the wet kitchens, even more than the dry kitchens, where there's kind of 80-20 rules, where like 80% of what's created in the wet kitchen might be thrown away, right? Because it's so experimental, it's so new that it might not make it. It might not be a viable mutation. So it's actually healthy for pockets to be around really creative places, glass blowing studios and sculpture and paintings and all these and actual kitchens. And what you'll find is these environments usually have people from very diverse backgrounds. That kitchens are almost like pirate ships, and you have all sorts of outcasts and people who've come from all different walks of life, and they end up banding together and having a band of merry pranksters. So, and then we go over to the personality side. And so the sixth color, personal, is really meant to not keep track of like who owes who money, or not keep track of who's winning and losing, or who's getting the better deal. Or it's really just about perceiving the singularity of something as being incomparable to anything else. And this is what Ra had as well, although he had the right variable here. So this left variable, this is part of the concentrated binary, the splenic binary, and so it's kind of like always on. It's always scanning, always noticing, always watching out. And when it's in its transference, that will be the transference to trying to keep track of winners and losers and power view, like who has the power, who doesn't. It's seeing things in a very political way. And that's not really how you're here to see. It's actually better for you to see what nobody else sees in something. Like, what is singular about this? What has never happened that way before? So instead of going to HDHD and then saying, well, last year was better, or immediately putting it into comparison, it's like, what is unique about this year? What is happening at HDHD now that'll never happen again, that never has happened again? So it's all about seeing uniqueness, and that's the sixth color, which is really seeing what is beyond comparison. And with that first tone, we call that let's see, we would call that security or insecurity. Really, I guess it's security, but it's also keeping an eye out. It's kind of like checking to see what's going on with a vigilant eye that's never really lapsing. It's kind of always keeping an eye on it. That's what the left variable is doing here. Is in this concentrated binary, it's just always on, always watching. And then we get up to the motivation, and that is motivated by uncertainty. So that's the second tone, but part of the same binary. And so that's also kind of always on. So that what that one thing that we'll say is that for pockets that she can have a sidekick or be a sidekick or have somebody around a lot, because with these first and second tones, which is all she has in all four positions, that is here to kind of always be on. And it is here to be a marathon runner, and it is here to always be able to use that. It's like a drip, drip, drip of the awareness that continues dripping at a slow enough pace that it can always be on as long as she's awake from the moment she wakes up in the morning till she goes to sleep at night. It can kind of always be present, always be alert. And so because of that, it's saving up, or it's not really, it's kind of always on, so it's being sparing in its usage of the attention, compared to a third tone, which is action tone, which will like use up all of its energy and then crash and need to like sleep. This is more like this marathon runner who is kind of always able to pay attention. And ultimately, with fear, which has the archetype of the teacher, this is the teacher that is attuned to uncertainty. They're attuned to where the conditions of possibility might change, and they're keeping an eye on when things might change because they know it might be changing soon. So it's really the ability to give people the how, which is the teacher, and to kind of strike how into their hearts as well. It's not just that you yourself benefit from the how questions, but that you're able to ask your students and those who learn from you, clients, whoever, how they know things and kind of get them to develop their own foundation. You can test their foundation. That's a first color thing. So with your outer authority, you're testing their foundation, and ultimately you're testing it motivated by uncertainty. And so this is like, let's get to the bottom of what actually is changing and what isn't. If it were first tone, it would be saying, let's get to the bottom of what's unsafe or what we can do to be more secure. Like let's make more money, or let's lock the doors, or let's do things that'll, I don't know, like different kinds of security, whether more concrete or more abstract. Now obviously taking this up to the line level, being a 4-6, a huge part of what Pockets is here to do is to get the message across to the other. And a big part of her question is, how do I successfully reach the other? How do I get to them? And so this is a fourth line that's reaching the other in order to test their foundation and teach the other. And how is it doing this, and how is it motivated? It's ultimately fueled by uncertainty, which is the possibility that things will change. And so it's basically saying, yeah, things are a certain way, but they could change. And so let's make sure we have a solid foundation and that we've tested everything that we possibly can, right? And then really getting the message across to the other. So I see a comment from Christine here. So what do you do if yours are back and forth? Well, let's look at Christine's in a moment here, and then I'll read that question. That'd be great. But just finishing kind of the conventional analysis, I want to do the Rhodes analysis. Yeah, it's funny. We have Richard Rudd and Steve Rhodes, and then we have Phil Red. So all of these RD names. But yeah, so that would be kind of a conventional starting point for looking at how you look at the tones and the colors. If anyone has comments on that, because it's pretty different from how Rhodes looks at it, and I think Pockets is already kind of familiar with his approach, but it would be interesting just to review it. But yeah, are there any comments or ideas kind of on how? I mean, very rare to see for all four placements having tone 1 and 2. And this is a very different kind of cognition from what I have, where I have action tone. So I go into off mode where I'm like completely unable to do anything. And then I seem like almost like a robot or something, and you turn me on. And then when I'm in on mode, it's like a flurry of activity and a lot of things happening. And I kind of spend all of that energy, and then I don't have the energy anymore and I have to rest. So I'm part of this periodic thing, which is on and off. It's like an individual pulse. And so my awareness will be really on, then I'll hit the wall and be really off. And that's because of my third tone. For Pockets here, it's really that always on, and not just on the personality side, but on the design side as well. So I really just see that marathon runner quality. So, okay, well, let's look at what Steve Rhodes says, and then let me get to your question, Christine. But so for Steve Rhodes, tone is the mood setter, and that's what makes you happy and puts you in a good mood. And Pockets only has one thing that's ever going to put her in a good mood, and that is succeeding, being a winner. And so for Pockets to be happy requires a certain amount of competition. And if she doesn't have enough competition in her life, that's underutilizing and maybe not exercising those parts that are competitive. Of course, we have an undefined ego, so it's not about winning and then converting that into life force energy. It's about winning and being in a good mood because you won, and just not being a loser, being a winner, quote unquote, and what it means to be a winner, right? To have more than enough resources and more than enough success, and to have really everything in the physical locked down. Because when we think about the spleen is all about the physical. She already has a packed spleen, so all of the splenic activation, but then also at the tonal level, it's like all four of the big four are splenic. And so this is a very physical mind and a very physical body and a very physical way of seeing the world. And I guess what it really means is you can't fake yourself into being in a good mood if the actual real world is not tended to. Like, you can't be in a good mood if the real world things are not working. Some people can be in a great mood because they have the ajna tone, And so the world can be on fire, but they're happy because they're not really physically attuned. They're mentally attuned. Or they could be emotionally attuned, like we saw with Dave, where he had those feeling tone placements. So as long as he has good food and good comfort and feels good, he can be happy. But that's not the case for you, Pockets. Like, you really need to succeed in the physical world, in the real world, to be happy. And there's a competitive aspect to that as well. So competing, like a good example would be when I went through Techstars, there were 1,400 companies that applied that year. In addition to my company, 1,401, and they only let in 10. So 1,390 of those companies aren't getting in. And it felt really good. I have success tones also. It felt really, really good to be chosen, to beat out all those other contenders. And they gave us $130,000 as a check for winning. And that felt really good. So, like, there's no substitute to getting written a check because you've won in competition against a whole bunch of other people, right? Like, it sounds simple, but that is something that success tones are here for. Like, you wouldn't be designed with those tones if you weren't meant to do that and to have that kind of competition in you. So that is going to be part of it. And then just the people that are around you. I guess the other way that Rhodes looks at the nodes are that these are people that we can really spend an unlimited amount of time with those kinds of people. And as soon as the person is different from your nodes, so as soon as they're not, oh, that's so funny, you have 4-6 as both your nodes and your profile. So you're you like being around 4-6s, and you like people who are high resilience, even though you yourself are low resilience, right? High and medium resilience. And you also like them to be highly competent. And that is the success tones. Like, they're really good at their job. They do what they say they're going to do, and they're good at it, and there's no mistakes, and they're just highly competent and handle stress and handle pressure. That's something about tones 1 and 2. And I was saying, like, you probably wouldn't find tones 5 and 6 as heart surgeons because there's so much stress. You could kill somebody if you do the wrong thing. Or airline pilots, or any of these high stress jobs. And you're going to find a lot of tones 1 and 2 who can handle that. Yeah, hardcore MFs. Exactly, Rachel. So, yeah, so Pockets can handle people who are in life-threatening situations and have to carry guns and have to go into these high resilience, you know, people like Richard Corbett. He is high and medium resilience, and he was a captain in the military and had 41 people under him. And right, exactly, military was great for you. Yes, so you can handle success, which is like very like utilitarian, get the job done, highly competent, highly driven, ultimately competing with yourself, competing to be better or to do the best you can or to just continually improve and striving and all that. So yeah, so that's kind of how Rhodes would look at it, is the nodes are really who you're drawn to, and then the sun earth is who you are. And yeah, yeah, and so you can kind of just see that even though you're lower resilience, you can handle higher resilience. And it's so interesting that you are drawn to the 4-6s just like you yourself are a 4-6. So you might have a problem with very reactive people. That's something Steve Rhodes says about lines 1 and 2, is that they're the most reactive lines. And so because you don't have anything in that binary, you might just be annoyed by people who are super reactive to things and kind of overreacting to things. But, again, it's not that you can't be with those people. It's just you can kind of spend unlimited time with the people who match up to your nodes. And then the more they diverge from the nodes, the more you kind of have limits on how long you can be around them. So, yeah, not into highly sensitive assholes. Exactly, Rachel. That's yeah. So I'm sure we could untangle more, but just in the interest of time, I want to just take a look at Christine's chart here and address her question. But this has been pretty fun doing some of the substructure, yeah, some of the substructure analysis. So let's see what we have here. I have Christine's body graph here. Okay, and let me just read the question. So the question was when the arrows are kind of opposite, like they are here. like the sun, or actually they're both opposite, the personality and design. So what she's asking about is particularly with the sun earth, where the right closed determination, so that's closed taste, but then left active natural shores environment, icy. So yeah, it's kind of like it's twisty because each side has one left and one right, and then each category has one left and one right. So it is this kind of twisty. So she's saying the right variable determination, but with an active environment and an athletic channel, that channel of ambition, 5432, going from the root to the sacral. So like, how do we kind of disentangle what needs to be athletic or not, and then more meditative on the right variable there. Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of, I guess, yeah, you can see these as contradictions, but I do think there is a way to interpret them over time. So, just as an example, like, say you had all right variables and then you only had left in the environment. That would be a right variable person in a left variable world. So, that would be like a holistic life coach for CEOs and executives, you know. So you're like in an environment of very cutthroat stockbrokers, but you yourself are bringing them right variable holistic health and things like that, right? Would be an example. Or, you know, say you were everything was left except for your perspective. That would be like Ra, where you would just be kind of fully responsible for being highly competent and driven and all these left variable things. But what you get to see in this world is that right variable gift of seeing things that nobody else has really seen in history up until now, because you can see what's so unique and so special about this time that it doesn't have in common with any other time. It's like seeing beyond commonality. Left variable seeing is pattern matching and finding commonalities and saying, oh, I saw a great movie. It was really like this other movie. It was like Star Wars on acid. Or, you know, you have all of these comparisons, and that's how the left variable sees, because the left variable is always categorizing and putting things into patterns and comparing them. But that right variable gift is to really see the uniqueness of something. So you can kind of play the game when it gets complex because of all of the tangles. You can just imagine, you know, what if that was the only tangle, you know, basically, and kind of zoom in on it and understand just what that right variable view is about, or just what that left variable environment is about. And then from there, you can start to introduce more of the factors and really come up with some interesting ways of understanding it. But it seems to me that just starting, I guess, in the order of the four transformations, your brain system is right variable. And so it's going to need, to use Rhodes keynotes, it's going to need to feel good. It's going to need a certain amount of relaxation. It's going to need you know how James Alexander puts it, he has the same configuration of a left variable success tone personality and a right variable feeling tone design. And he basically says he hits the wall and his personality will drive his brain harder than the brain can handle. The personality is working the brain too hard. So the personality is kind of cracking the whip and making him do more and more and more slides. I was looking at the slides for his new series he's doing. He has like over 500 slides. I mean, it's amazing how much work he does. And I think the left variable can really be so diligent in its effort, right? Especially first and second tones, these marathon runners that are just so diligent. So you have this mind that is like so detail oriented and diligent and able to just work endlessly on something and persevere endlessly through that marathon runner second tone. But then the brain system hits the wall and it needs a bath and it needs a nice meal and it needs to meditate and shut down and do some yoga nidra and different things like that. So I think just looking at the personality and the design together, you're already going to have this difference between having a brain system that the negative is it really can't keep up with the personality. But the positive is it will then give you these amazing gifts and you don't know where they came from. And that's what the right variable does, but you usually can't get them yourself. Usually you just find yourself saying them or you find them coming out somehow. It's very relational. So I notice with James that he'll spend a lot of time talking to people, and then in that talking, we'll discover something that's pulled out from his right variable. I don't have that. I don't have that interpersonal requirement because I have two left variables. Pockets doesn't have that. She's like me, she's more left variable, more independent in that sense. The right variable requires the other person to pull out that information. So that's the first thing to look at, is just with the sun earths, that you have that dichotomy. And then when it comes to the environments, you have a very like unique right variable way of seeing things, where you're not really focused. You're meant to kind of see peripherally. You're meant to not be tracking and keeping track of things. It's not like in a room, you're not meant to like count how many times this happens or keep track of who's talking to who or doing this or that. It's much more organic and holistic as a view, and just allowing that to naturally come in. And then for the environment, though, you do need to be around a certain amount of activity. I have a friend here, Russell, who has hosted the post-conference retreats, at least for one night, this last year, and then previous years he hosted for multiple nights. And what I've noticed about Russell, I haven't looked at his body graph. I know he's a 3-6. I haven't checked his nodes, but I noticed that he does really well. And in fact, he's very aware of the fact that he needs people to have a lot of activity around him. That on his land, he'll let people come stay with him, sometimes for free, simply because they're busy and they're working. And he's a woodworker, he's a generator, he's always working. And I think just having this left variable environment of people working is just so healthy for him, and healthy and very conducive for that place. And that's what I've noticed, is that he would rather have someone live with him for free and be working all the time than to have someone pay rent and be a couch potato. Because if someone's paying rent and then they're sitting around, that couch potato energy, it kind of makes it hard to work. Like, they are kind of two different things. I mean, we can think of left and right variable as fundamental as standing up and sitting down, as fundamental as working and resting, as fundamental as activity and passivity. And so these are very core fundamentals, and you're just meant to be in an active environment. So that would be one way of interpreting those twists. And then if we take what Rhodes says about the nodes being what we're drawn to, it's also funny because it's like you can be drawn, I guess, yeah, we would just look at the tones. And so you're drawn to respect and feeling people. And so even though you yourself are very success driven on the personality, you like people who have a very laid back personality, like Dave Myers. You really enjoy how pleasant and how not type A they are, because you're type A enough for the both of you. So on the personality side, like me, I'm type A enough for the both of most people I'm around too. So you don't really need the person you're around to be such a vigilant, driven person, because you have that vigilance and that drive in your personality. Then on the design side, you yourself may not be as active, but you like people who are fairly active. You like people who are kind of busy in that way. And so there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's what I like about Steve Rhodes and his interpretation of kind of who we're drawn to, because it basically says they might infuriate us, but something in us likes these people. They're on our nodal path. Our nodes are pointing at them. We saw that with Rachel, how her nodes are pointing at guilt people. So even if they can be, not the easiest sometimes. Loving these comments, Rachel. Yeah, these are great. Naps and smokes save lives. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, well, this has been a really fun time. I've really enjoyed having everyone here, and it was fun looking at some different body graphs. So I'd like to do this again soon. I may start my own weekly, just open body graph hour. I don't know, but either way, it was fun filling in for James. And yeah, lots of love, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll talk to you all soon. Take care.